If you want to get more FPS, improve your visual quality to see enemies better, and just make your game look way more aesthetically pleasing, then make sure to pay close attention to this video and watch it all the way through so you don't miss out on any of these crucial tips, since the default settings in Call of Duty Warzone are far from optimal. By the way, welcome, I'm TCaptainX. I've earned millions of views in my graphics settings guides alone with hundreds of positive testimonials. So if you're new here, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on the best settings, guides, meta loadouts, and much more for Call of Duty Warzone. Also, I stream here on YouTube and Twitch, so come say hi in a stream. I want to be very clear that I am on a very high-end PC and that I definitely cannot guarantee you guys to be getting the same performance that I am getting, but I can guarantee no matter what PC specs you have, we can make some serious improvements to your FPS and quality. So starting in the display tab of our graphics settings, number one, display mode, very important that we are on full screen exclusive. It's going to reduce any possible latency and delay. However, if you have multiple monitors, full screen borderless is generally fine, but there is some potential performance things that you are sacrificing here. Display monitor is just whatever your main monitor is going to be. Display adapter is whatever your main GPU is. For your screen refresh rate, just make sure this is the highest. Typically auto is fine, so I'm going to 240 hertz, so it automatically rescales down just below 240. Display resolution, this will depend on your monitor. Most of you guys are probably going to be 1920 by 1080, but I am on a 2K monitor or a 1440, so mine is going to look like this. Generally, auto will be just fine and should automatically scale to your monitor's resolution capabilities. Now, if you are on a ultra wide monitor or just a unique sized monitor, your resolution and your aspect ratio might look a little bit different. Automatic should automatically sort it, but most of you guys are going to be on a standard 16:9. However, if you're on a different size, like a wide, you might be on one of these ones down here. You can look this up by Googling and searching your monitor aspect ratio if you're unsure. One thing I want to note is that when we are done putting in all of our graphic settings, we are going to want to restart our shaders preloading before we jump into a game. For display gamma, if you are on a PC monitor, you're going to be on 2.2, but if you're on a TV for some reason, you would be on 2.4. For gamma brightness, typically leaving this on 50 is just fine, but generally I do like to turn mine up just slightly to about 55, but I would not crank this up too high, like beyond 60 or 65, because then things will just start to look way too washed out. Now, NVIDIA reflex low latency, this is a little bit of a confusing setting, and if you're on an AMD GPU, I believe it's called AMD anti-lag. I actually have mine off, and the reason for that is that since the Season 3 update, I've actually been experiencing a lot of dev errors, and since turning this off, this has been one of the main things that has fixed that, and I'm no longer experiencing them. So if you are crashing a lot, you might want to consider turning this off, but for the most part, usually this does not cause problems, and this might just be hardware specific to my PC. So to determine if you're going to be on or on plus boost depends if you are CPU or GPU bound. You're going to need to go over to your interface settings. Under the global tab, go down to telemetry, make sure this is on custom, hit show more, and make sure our GPU time and our CPU time are checked on. You'll see them pop up here in the top left corner, but we need to actually go into a game to test this accurately. So once you're actually in a game, look up there your GPU and CPU time, and the number that is higher is going to be the one that you are bound to. If yours is like mine right now, where it's kind of hovering mostly at the same, or as you can see now, it's flashing down to 3, then I would always favor towards assuming that you are GPU bound. So if that GPU number was higher, then leave it to on, or if they were tied. But if your CPU time was higher, you're going to put it to on plus boost. Now for my AMD users, I've heard this particular setting for them, the anti-lag one, has caused a lot of issues. So you might be better to just simply leave it off. For sustainability, we can change the preset to custom, and then I'd recommend turning both of the V-Syncs to off. However, if you are experiencing screen tearing, which you can see in this picture here, where the pictures don't line up and a part of it has teared kind of off, then you might want to consider turning these on and starting from the lowest percentage and working up until that screen tearing goes away. Now, the problem with VSync is that it causes input delay or lag, basically. So you only want to turn this on if you are experiencing a lot of screen tearing. For custom frame rate limit, usually just going to unlimited is the easiest solution. However, you can also change and adjust your settings based on if you're in the game or in the menu and things like that. If you experience overheating issues, you're on an older PC, you might want to consider going to the custom and then cranking your gameplay limit up as high as you can go, but turning your menu and out of focus down. That way your GPU and CPU can kind of cool down when you're not in game. Even if your monitor can't support going up to like 300 hertz or 300 refresh rate, it's perfectly fine to go above this unless you are experiencing a ton of screen tearing, as some monitors will experience that when the FPS gets above its capabilities. Reduce menu render resolution. You can just leave this to optimal. Basically what this does is when you are in the menu and not in game, it's going to slightly reduce some of the graphics quality so that it is going to just kind of conserve your PC. Native will keep it looking as good as it can. Maximal will really turn things back. If you have an overheating issue, you might want to consider doing maximal. Pause game rendering. You can just leave this off. It's not a really big deal here. If you turn this on, when you bring the menu up, it'll basically just like pause the game behind it. So it is like reducing any usage, and again, for overheating issues. Reduce quality when active. 10 minutes is fine. Basically, if you're just inactive, if you're AFK, it will basically just lower the consumption of how hard the PC is working to work on the game. And then focus mode, I would generally recommend leaving this to 0. You would only want to use this if you're playing on like a super ultra wide monitor, or if you're like splitting your game across multiple monitors. And then high dynamic range, you can leave this to automatic, and then just make sure you do the calibration really quick where you pick where it is barely visible for each one. So for mine, I'm going with those numbers there. That will be different monitor to monitor though. Over in the quality tab. Now, if you have a like 2K or 4K monitor, but your PC can't quite handle and get good FPS there, you absolutely might want to consider turning your render resolution down. Generally, I would say if you're not getting a consistent 100 to 120 plus FPS, then you might want to consider turning your render resolution down if you're above a 1080p monitor. Now, if you're on 1080p, I wouldn't really go much lower than that because then the game's going to look really bad. And I definitely would not recommend turning this up above this, because especially if your monitor is not capable of these resolutions, there's just basically no point. I have heard some people say that if you are highly CPU bound, which is rare, that you can play with turning this up a little bit, but in my case, there is zero benefit to going beyond 100. Dynamic resolution, I would leave this off unless you are on a very low end PC and really struggling with FPS. You can turn this on, and then you can set a frame rate target. What this does is it will dynamically lower the resolution to try to hit that minimum frame rate target. So if you set a minimum for 60, it will bring down the graphics so that it can boost up your FPS. Upscaling and sharpening. If you're looking for absolute maximum performance, if you're on a low-end PC, you're going to want to leave this off. But for most people, Fidelity FX Cast is going to make the game look a lot sharper and better with almost no performance hit at all. Now, there are a lot of different settings here, and some of this can depend on your system specs, but for most people, Fidelity FX is best. And then under the show more, the strength is really personal preference. The higher you go, the more kind of like sharper or crisp the image will look. But sometimes it starts to look a little bit like blocky and grainy when you go too high. So I normally just keep mine about 50, but again, it is personal preference. I'd recommend leaving both of the frame generations on off. Now, a lot of people will kind of get all their panties in a bunch over this one. When you turn these on, you will get a lot higher FPS, but it causes a significant amount of input delay, or basically a lag. And for a competitive FPS game like Warzone, where milliseconds matter, this is just not worth it. You are not actually really getting that FPS because of the input delay that it adds. Maybe you could consider trying it on a low-end PC, but I think low-end PCs aren't even capable of using this setting. DRAM scale target is an interesting one and can be different from system to system. For most people, just leaving this in the default 70 tends to be fine. If you are experiencing a lot of hitches or big stutters, then turning this down could be a good thing, especially if you are filling up your VRAM usage bar down here at the bottom from your usage to your target. So on my PC, because I'm on a higher end PC, I have plenty of VRAM and this is not an issue, but personally, I haven't really noticed any difference in performance when I crank this above 70. I've tested this multiple times, and so I just leave mine at 70 personally. Variable rate shading, I'd recommend turning on. What this does is it's actually going to slightly reduce the resolution on the edges of your screen. You can barely notice this difference, but this actually will boost your FPS quite a lot. All right, when it comes to the rest of these settings and quality, a lot of this depends on your goal and also your PC. So listen to very carefully of how I explain these. For most people, if you're looking to maximize FPS, going as low as you can with almost all of these settings will do that. However, when we go to very low, the game looks really bad in some areas and the textures just kind of look like Play-Doh. Low is a very small difference in terms of FPS. Like you might only lose 1 to 3 FPS depending on your system, but it looks a lot better. So for most people, I'd recommend low. I play on normal because I have a very high-end PC and I can get away with it, and there is a pretty noticeable difference from low to normal in terms of making the game just look better. However, this won't really help much in terms of the visibility of your enemies. So again, again, if you care about performance and being able to be very competitive, just stick to low or very low. For texture, filter, and stereotropic, again, sticking to low is going to be the best for performance or for low-end PCs. However, going up to something like high doesn't really affect your FPS very much at all, but it can make the game look a little bit cleaner and sharper. Depth of field, make sure this is off. Detail quality, again, if you're looking for max performance and for competitiveness or on a low-end PC, stick to low. But again, going up to normal on a normal to higher end PC will make the game look a lot crisper and just kind of more realistic with only a minimal impact on performance. Particle resolution, I'd recommend keeping this to very low for almost everyone. I actually think it's easier to see through explosions and stuff when it is on very low as well. Bullet impacts don't really affect much in terms of FPS, but I actually like to leave mine on. That way I can see kind of like recoil patterns and stuff like that if I'm trying to test that. But for max performance, you're gonna want to leave those off. Persistent effects, make sure this is off. Now shader quality, this is a unique one, so listen up. I'm gonna put some side-by-side comparisons on screen here. On the left is shader quality with low, and what you will notice is the ground level surfaces of like the grass, the mud, it looks very smooth and very kind of low quality when it is on low. Shader quality, however, though, is a big setting when it comes to your performance. But when you go up to medium, it makes the game look so much better. So if you're on a very low end PC, if you're struggling to get by, keep this thing on low. But if you can sacrifice a little bit of FPS, maybe 5 to 10 at the most, going up to medium is definitely worth it. Now, this is not really going to help you in terms of seeing your enemies much better, but from a just visual aesthetic thing, this does make the game look a lot better going up to medium. If you do this, make sure to go back and hit restart shaders and then restart your game and let those shaders download before this effect will actually take place. On-demand texturing, make sure this is turned down to minimal, and then under show more, turn this all the way down and keep your download limits to off. This, if you are experiencing packet loss and lagging and stuff like that, this should help with that. And then local texture streaming quality, also you're gonna wanna keep this to low. Now shadows in general tend to be a setting that really messes with our performance. So for all of these, I'd recommend leaving these on low. I will say shadow quality on very low does make the shadows very blocky and look kind of bad, but you can still see the shadows. So this is another setting that if you're on kind of more a higher end PC, going up to something like normal will make shadows look a lot crisper, but you will impact and suffer a little bit of FPS at the cost of this. Everything else here we keep off or low. And then for environment, same thing here. We're gonna keep all of this to off or low. Again, this is all stuff that does make the quality of the game look a little bit better, but it's not a night and day difference like it is with shader quality. So for performance and competitiveness, I'd recommend leaving all of these off. So I prefer to play on the max 120 field of view, which gives me that very wide field of view. But if I turn this way down to 60, I am way zoomed in and I cannot see enemies at my peripheral vision at all. Now the benefit to this is that things appear to be much closer to you. However, when you are shooting your gun, you feel that recoil a lot more because visually you're way closer to the gun, like you had a big zoom optic on it. But when I crank this back to 120, that same recoil pattern feels like there is much less recoil now because we are zoomed and farther away from that gun. Now, if you're coming back to Warzone after a while, the default FOV back in the day was 80. And so jumping up to 120 might feel a little bit too much and targets might just look a little bit too small and too far away from you. So I'd recommend starting somewhere around 100. And as you get more comfortable, try to slowly bump up. I will say the vast majority of the top players do play at 120 in Warzone, but there are still a lot of really good players that play around the anywhere from 105 to 115. So don't feel bad if that just feels a little bit better to you. Most top players play on ADS field of view affected, but independent might be a good setting for some casual players. What this does is it will keep your hip fire field of view at the number that you set, so 120, but when I aim my gun, it zooms in a lot, even if you only have a 1X or a iron sight optic. So this is good for seeing people at your periphery when you're in close quarters, but when you need to shoot at someone far away, it zooms in and you can see them a little bit better. Again, I prefer affected, which just keeps that field of view out, very zoomed out. For the weapon field of view, I'd recommend going to wide. Third person, you can go to 90, although this doesn't really matter much in Warzone. And then vehicle field of view, also go to wide. And then for all of these camera settings, we're gonna want all of these to off and then the camera movements to least to reduce any of that unnecessary kind of screen shake and blurriness. Inverted flashbang, this is totally up to you. I leave mine on white, but if that bothers your eyes, then you can turn this to inverted and that will flashbang it black. Really quickly, I will cover my audio settings here. Now I wanna point out that I use Art is War's audio. If you're interested in doing this. This is a custom EQ setting to kind of help make footsteps louder. Look up Art is War, one word, on YouTube, and he has a video walking you through how to do this. But in general, I would recommend turning your music volume way down or even off, and then turning your dialogue volume down significantly, but leaving your effects up to 100. If you're just playing with the default audio, this is going to be your speakers. For speaker output, this could be default or surround. I would leave the headphone mode off personally. And then for the audio mix, honestly, the default trailer mix is probably the best, although some people do like Sucker Punch. It makes footsteps louder, but it also makes other noises like explosions much lighter too, which can drown out footsteps. Now under the interface tab here, starting here in global here, I would recommend you skip the intro movie. It's just annoying every time you boot the game up. Talked about telemetry briefly. These are the ones that I leave on. This is like how to see your FPS, how to see how much latency you have. These are the ones that I leave on, but I turn off these three here, but it's totally personal preference. Under readability here, I do have my subtitles off just because they kind of annoy me, but that is personal preference. But under color customization here, I have custom changed my HUD colors, so like my enemy pings and things like that. The main one that I have changed is my enemy ping. I've changed it from that default red to kind of this pinkish purplish, just because I feel like that stands out. It's a little bit easier for me to see. And then down at the bottom here, you're going to want to make sure that your color filter is set to filter 2, filter target to both, and then both of these intensities to 100. And this is just gonna make the game look a little more vibrant and kind of pop and be a little more aesthetically pleasing. Now, one thing you might notice about my screen is my minimap is very, very large, and I'm gonna show you how to do this, but unfortunately you have to own the multiplayer to do this. It's kind of dumb, but let me show you. So go into Black Ops 6 multiplayer. From here, go to our settings tab and then down to interface, which is just behind my webcam. Under the gameplay HUD, you're gonna have a setting called multiplayer HUD presets. This is only in multiplayer and not in Warzone, unfortunately, which it should be really. And change this interface layout down to magnified. Once it's there, go over to visuals here. Make sure your minimap shape is set to square, minimap under compass, minimap rotation is on, and then radar is off. On the scale, I like to personally crank this sucker up to 150, leave information to all, and then leave both of these other scales to 100. Now down here at the bottom, one thing that you can do is you can reduce the opacity or make kind of these things see-through. And so I like to make my medals and notifications, which pop up at top, a little bit see-through. So in case there's like an enemy behind it, I can see through that. And same with my score feed, because score feed kind of pops up in the center. So you turn these down, you can kind of start to see through it, but still see them at the same time. And then over in colors, we basically already did this part. This is where we change the HUD color and then those color filter settings. You can then go back into Warzone, and as long as you don't change anything, our interface settings should carry over, even though those settings aren't available here to change. Now, one thing to note with this is there's a little bit of a bug when you do this with the circle zones, like the edge of the circle. Sometimes they will not line up right where they should. So if that bothers you, you can just leave this to 100. But personally, because that minimap is so much bigger and you can pinpoint better where enemies are on the map, I think that small thing is absolutely worth it. Back in Warzone, a few other things to make sure we have set. For compass type, make sure this is set to horizontal. Then I haven't really messed with too many of these other settings. However, in Crosshair, you're going to want to make sure this is set to on. I like to have my Crosshair dot scale as largest, where that center dot is really big. And then I leave my opacity up to 100, but this is not a horrible idea to turn this down. You know, I'm going to try turning this down just a little bit so I can kind of see through that crosshair. But I do change my crosshair color to this green color. That just helps me see my crosshair a little bit better. Really, it is personal preference. A lot of people like kind of like that pink or purple or even a yellow maybe, but just pick a color that stands out to your eyes. I like to leave my hit marker visuals and damage-based hit markers to on. And then again, these are those same opacity settings that we talked about where you can turn these notifications down. All right, we're going to cover some settings outside of the game, but before we close, go over to your display tab in graphic settings and hit the restart shaders preloading, close your game, and then when you boot it back up, you'll have to re-download those shaders. So from here in the bottom left corner, go ahead and type in graphics, and you're going to click on graphics settings down here. From here, you're probably going to want to turn on your hardware accelerated GPU scheduling. If this was off and you turn it on, you will have to restart your PC. Now this can be system to system, but in the vast majority of cases, having this on should help the performance and latency of your game. After that, you can go down and you can set the Call of Duty app as high performance or kind of high priority. So you can just hit browse, you can search it, and then you can set it as a high performance app. It's also very important that your GPU drivers are updated. So if you're on NVIDIA, you can go to NVIDIA.com and you can get the latest drivers, or if you're on AMD, you would go to AMD's website and do that. I am currently on the latest driver, 572.83. It's been fine for me generally, but I typically do not constantly update my drivers unless I hear from other people that a new driver is significantly better, because sometimes new drivers get introduced and they can be the culprit to causing things like crashes and dev errors. And if you want this specific driver, you can go on NVIDIA's website and then you can type in that specific driver and download that one specifically. Another thing to consider is making sure your motherboard BIOS and chipsets are up to date. So if you go and you type in system information in your search bar and pull this up, under the baseboard product here will tell you what your motherboard is. You can copy paste that into Google and then pull up your motherboard. And then under the support tab, there will usually be drivers like your BIOS here. Now, I'm not going to walk you guys through how to do this, but there are lots of YouTube videos out there how to do this. If you have a board that is 6 months to a year old and you haven't done this, updating this can usually solve a lot of problems if you're experiencing things like crashes and whatnot. You can also update things like your CPU chipset. There are usually other drivers that you can update for your motherboard and stuff like that. And doing all of those things can just ensure, if you do this every 6 months to a year, can ensure that your PC is going to be running smoothly. After that, in the bottom left, you're going to type in game mode, and game mode settings should come up, and you're going to want to turn game mode on. If you have a NVIDIA GPU, go ahead and right click and open on your right click anywhere on your desktop and go to the NVIDIA control panel. If you have an AMD card, this will be similar, but a little bit different. And I don't have one, so I can't walk you through it. I'm sorry. So at the top, adjust image settings with preview here. It depends where yours is going to be, but for now, click on the use my preference and then go over to performance. And then from there, hit apply, and then go back up to use the advanced 3D image settings and hit apply. Under in manage 3D settings. Now you can apply these globally, or you can apply it to the program only. I go ahead and apply mine globally, but you can search in here and apply these to Call of Duty only if that's what you prefer. I'm just going to go ahead and scroll through and show these here. You can pause and you can kind of copy these over. This will depend on system to system. So this is not going to be exact. I defer to people that are a little bit smarter than me, a little bit more tech savvy on some of this stuff, that really get in the nitty gritty and test this. So my guy Papa Season, he's the guy that kind of helps me with all my PC graphic stuff. And this is exactly what he's recommending as of now, based off what he's tested for most systems. But if you're having unique problems, reaching out to someone that is very good or kind of looking up your specific specs might be beneficial. One setting I do want to mention is the low latency mode. If you are highly GPU bound, which in my case I am, usually if I run that multiplayer benchmark, I'm like 90% GPU bottlenecked. You might want to consider turning low latency mode to on or even ultra and just playing around with these settings and seeing if you notice a difference in performance. This is very system by system, and in most situations, you're going to be safest to leave this off, but this is one that might be worth playing around with. After that, go down to change resolution. Make sure both of your, or however many monitors you have, is set to the correct resolution and refresh rate here. So for my main gaming monitor, I'm on a 2K native, and then my refresh rate is 240. There's a lot of people that have like 144 hertz monitors and haven't realized that they've been on 60 hertz the entire time and actually not getting that FPS. Next, go over to adjust desktop color settings here, and you can do this per monitor, but for your main gaming monitor, I would recommend turning your contrast up just slightly. I go up to 55, makes the image look a little bit sharper. And then under digital vibrance, I like to crank this setting up way up to about 80. This makes my game just look way more vibrant and the colors look way more pleasing. But for a lot of people, this might be a little bit OD, and you might want to stick to closer around like 60 to 70, but I like to crank mine up. Then we're going to go to adjust desktop size and position. And for both your monitors or however many you have, for the scaling, make sure this is on no scaling, perform scaling on display, and then make sure your resolution and refresh rate are set to where they need to be. Then under adjust video color settings, go over to make sure this is with the NVIDIA settings, click advanced, and make sure this is set to full. And then from there, you just go ahead and close out of this. Next, we are going to adjust some game config files to really kind of maximize some of our performance. So on your file explorer, open your documents tab, and you're going to want to go to Call of Duty here. Double click that. Then you're going to go to players, double click that. At the top here, you should have 3 files that look kind of similar of this S.1.0 COD 24. If you have other games, you're going to have lots of other COD things in here, but we need the COD 24. Now yours might look a little bit different than mine, but the one that we're going to want to go for is it should be a TXT file. And if you have a 0 and a 1, you're going to want to go with the one that is 0. So double click on that to open. When it opens, it might prompt you, what do you want to open this with? Just go with Notepad. It should look a little bit something like this. Also, before I go any farther, I just want to clarify, I have had literal the hacker hunter people in Warzone make videos about this, about me doing this and saying that I am manipulating game files and I am cheating and I'm a hacker. I have literally spoken to a game developer for Call of Duty in person and asked him if it's okay to change these. And he said, yeah, absolutely. It's what they're meant for. These are just settings that are not available in the base game that you can go in and that you can kind of tweak more fine-tuned based off editing your config files. This is not cheating. This is not hacking. And if you think so, I don't know, you're weird. Now, if you want to make your life easy, I'm going to put some downloads that you can straight up go in and you can download them. You can delete all 3 of these and then you can copy paste those ones in and then just exit out and then boot up the game and bam, you're done. You don't have to worry about it. But if you don't want to download sketchy links from a weird guy with a mustache, then I'm going to walk you through what to change yourself. So when you're on here, hit Control F and the first thing you're going to type in is corpse. And it's going to say maximum number of AI corpses. And you're going to change this number here down to 0. What this does is when there are like dead bodies laying around, it will make them go away basically as soon as they're dead or shortly after, instead of the dead bodies stacking up. And this is less stuff for the game to process and render, which should improve your performance. But also, sometimes people are sneaky and they try to lay in those dead bodies. So that will also prevent that. After that, type in blood, and we're going to look to limit blood effects. And you're going to want to make sure this is set to true. On default, is going to be set to false. This is going to reduce the amount of blood splatter that comes out. And it's just less visual clutter, and you can just focus on what you're shooting at. And then right below it is going to be limiting blood effects. And you're going to want to turn this number up to the max of 2000. This just makes it so there is a larger delay between effects, again, being less blood. Next, we're going to type in probes, hit enter, and you're going to see enable half resolution reflection probes, and you're going to change this to true. After that, type in sun shadow, one word, and you will have static sun shadow moment clip map resolution. You're going to turn this sucker down to 0. Then type in texture space filtering, and you should have texture filtering quality level. It's also like right below here. You can just look at it. And actually, it looks like mine got changed for some reason. So we're going to want this to be ANISO 2X. You can also just copy Control C and then Control V it right here, and that will work too. Next, we're going to type in heaps, HEAPS, and you're going to have this GPU load heaps. We're going to change this bad boy to false. Then we're going to type in catmull, CATMULL, one word. You'll have this catmull Clark subdivision level. Turn the sucker down to 0. Then type in frame generation, 2 words, and just make sure this is set to false. This already should be, but just to double check. Then type in renderer, and we're going to have the thread count for handling job queue render worker count. All right, this is a little bit of a confusing one, and let me explain. Most of you guys are probably going to be at 7. Now, this information is coming from my guy Papa Season, who's the guy that I always go to for helping out me with my PC. And this is stuff that he has tested himself. If your CPU has 8 cores or 8 P cores, the general rule of thumb is however many cores you have, you want to do -1. However, if you have 8 cores or 8 P cores, performance cores, if you're on an Intel, you can test with 8 and see if you get any better performance, but in most cases, 7 is going to be best. If you don't know how many you have, just type in the CPU that you have. So I have an AMD Ryzen 9800X 3D. If I go into the specifications here and I scroll down, it'll say number of CPU cores 8. So I am going to do that -1 and go down to 7, but I could try 8 and see if I notice a difference. But if you're on an Intel CPU, especially a newer one, it'll probably say number of performance cores, and then you have number of efficient cores. We want to base this off performance cores, not the efficient cores. Same thing with this one, you would probably do 8 -1 = 7. But let's say you're on a little bit older or not super high-end one, so we've got an i5 13600. This one only has 6 performance cores. So in that case, you might want to try turning this down to 6 -1, which would be 5. So again, you're just going to type that number in right here. If you are on an AMD, you might want to type in anti, and then you would have this AMD anti-lag and make sure it is set to false. I'm on NVIDIA, so this literally doesn't matter for me. But this is a setting that we also can can just change in game if you have an AMD card. And then one last one we're going to type in is resiz, R-E-S-I-Z. You're going to have enable optimizations when resizable bar is supported. So for the vast majority of people, you're going to want this set to false. However, I am hearing some people with the new 50 series cards are benefiting from leaving this on true. And the best way to do this is for, if you have a 50 series card, is to put this to true, jump in game and just look at your FPS and then go back, change it to false and compare and see if you notice a difference. All right, and then when you are all done, go to File and make sure you press Save. Now, what we did today was kind of just scratching the surface, and for most people, this is gonna massively help things. But if you are looking to really maximize your performance, I get asked this question constantly. They're like, yo, I have the same specs as you, but you're getting way better FPS than me. And that's because my PC is overclocked. I have it kind of min-max for the performance. And when it comes to this stuff, I could make a video and try to walk you guys how to do this, but this is where you run into problems where people mess up along the way and they make things worse. And this is where going through someone that actually does this and know what they're doing is probably more worth it. So my guy is Papa Season. I am not making any money by referring to you to him. I've just been working with this guy for probably like 3 years now. He's been taking care of me for helping me with my PC. And he's just done a really good job. If I have issues, I hit him up and he helps me fix it. So he can do things like overclocking your CPU, GPU, RAM tunings, helping get all those kind of random nitty gritty settings right based off your own performance specs, and lots of other things like DDU driver, giving you a custom GPU driver. And then the one that made a massive difference for me was the internet optimization he did, where he helped kind of tweak some settings in my router and in my PC. And even though I had fiber internet, it made a massive difference in my latency for my performance that I was getting in game once he optimized my internet. So I'm going to leave a link in the description, but he's actually got a little kind of like discount going on for anyone that kind of comes to me from him. Again, I am making $0 on this. If you want to go and pay full price and just hit him up individually, go for it. I don't care. But again, he's just someone I trust and who I would recommend whenever I am having PC issues. One last thing, if you are experiencing a lot of dev errors, besides turning that low latency, that NVIDIA Reflex low latency mode to off, the other thing that I did that massively helped was turning back my RAM speeds. So I have a 7800 speed RAM, but turning mine down to 6800 has so far completely eliminated all of my dev errors. Again, this is going to be a very system to system, and this is something that Papa Season helped kind of walk me through, and we kept trialing things until we got to a point where it's been very stable, plus I'm still getting good performance. Otherwise, that's going to wrap things up, guys. I've got my controller settings video already on, my top loadouts video already on the channel, so if you want to go check those out, again, feel free to come drop by a stream, ask questions when I'm live here on YouTube or on Twitch, but I appreciate you guys. I'll do my best to look at comments if you have them. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.